Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your patience for being here. I'm Pooja, Product Manager for Actonix. Before we start for the webinar, a small brief about CyberDisti. CyberDisti is a multinational distribution company having presence in UAE, Oman, and India. In India, we have offices in Mumbai, Delhi, Kochi, Bangalore, and Chennai. So we are cybersecurity distributors with more than 20 plus OEMs, thanks to our CEO, Jibu John. Coming back to the webinar, the duration will be approx 30 minutes. We'll appreciate if you can keep your questions for Q&A round towards the end of the webinar. Without much ado, let's keep moving forward. Over to you, Atul. Please help us understand more about Actonix.
Thank you, Pooja. Okay, so let's start with the basic brief. The topic for today's webinar is if our Active Directory is not secure, nothing is. So when we say this bold statement, what basically we mean? So these are some of the cybersecurity breaches, data breaches that we have seen in year 2024. So this is just last year. And if you see, most of these companies are enterprise organizations like HDFC Group. You have Boat, you have Zerax, you have Angel One. Now, if we have to analyze in a very layman language, these are the guys wherein they have huge budgets, big IT teams, best of the tools to secure their infrastructure, and somehow people still find a way to get hold of few accounts, steal data. Now if these companies are not able to safeguard them or stop data breaches, we just need to imagine or understand the risks that could be there for mid and small enterprises. Now when we think about these cyber attacks, or when we analyze all these cyber attacks, we will see one common thing. There uh, there is a there is a executable which got into the infrastructure. Wa- that executable basically responsible for ransomware attack, a brute force attack, uh, credential theft. But the most common scenarios how these data breaches happen is a weak password. Someone get hold of user credentials somehow. Once we have those credentials, we execute a script or a Trojan, insert that in the infrastructure. It slowly starts capturing whatever required information and slowly start stealing that data. Now in today's agenda, we will basically try to cover um, uh, how solutions like us can help customers to get more visibility, have better understanding, and better predict and protect their infrastructure from threats like ransomware attack, brute force attack, any possible data breaches that we see these days. Now, the findings from most of the surveys or analysis of the latest data breaches talks about 80% of breaches are involving weak credentials. Systematic weakness in Active Directory, and systematic weakness basically includes over provisioning. Like we make someone an administrator, and we never remove him or never questions like why he need to be an administrator. If he needs to be an administrator, what's the duration? Then we talk about zero trust model, how it can help customers, to minimize this risk. And in the last, we will talk about question answers. Before we jump onto the demo or discussion mode, let's talk about who we are, what we basically do. So as a company, we are pretty young, dynamic company. We have more than 100 plus customers worldwide now. We have two offices. One is based out of India. The development basically happens in India. And then we have presence in Dubai, which basically caters to the global market. These are some of the logos that we have globally with us. Now, why Actonix and how it can help. So let me start with a very basic approach. Let's talk about a real world scenario, how it works. Now, when we think of an Actonix as a platform, we the solution basically works on pure web. So you have two interfaces, one for the administrator, another one for the users. The first thing which we discussed is credentials. So Active Directory passwords are the weakest link in any customer security. So if you have any customers who basically is above 50 users, they have Active Directory. Active Directory is basically a core of any infrastructure deployment. What Active Directory do is it allow customers to create or companies to create users. Basic, I need users. I need to define their permissions. So we create policies around it, like user X can do this, user Y can do that. Depending upon their roles and responsibility in Active Directory, we create roles and regulations or roles and responsibilities. We give assets based on their requirements, based on their roles and responsibilities. Now, Active Directory becomes the core for any infrastructure. If you have a single office, multi-office, you have 50 users or 50,000 users or 5 lakh users. Every customer will have Active Directory as a core of their infrastructure. Now, Active Directory is not something which is created recently. It's there in existence for more than 30 plus years now. Now, sadly, it have not changed drastically in last 30 years. There are modification, there are updates, but the core is more or less same. But threats have changed. They have evolved every day. There is new kind of threat. People are finding new ways to steal data. Now, one of the weakest link in Active Directory is how we manage passwords. So password becomes a entry point. So in natively, when you work with Active Directory, it only gives you a policies wherein it asks like, okay, you need to change your passwords every 30 days, 45 days. You define a policy. Based on that policy, every user in a company will get notified like, okay, every 30 days you have to change your password. Now, what it can apply further is that, okay, in your password, in Active Directory, it will talk about, you have to have a capital character. You need to have a small character. You need to also add some special characters, some numeric characters. This is something which you can define to add, enhance it further. Active Directory, Microsoft said, kind of like you cannot use the old passwords, maybe last 7 or 8 passwords. That's it. So in last 30 years, this is the only security which Microsoft have added to Active Directory around password policies. But sadly, these are not sufficient. These are not ample to protect any infrastructure. Why? Because as a user, you need to understand there are two, side of password management. One, as a company, I want to implement strongest of the policy. Now, what would be the strongest? I would say, okay, you need to have 20 characters in your password. 20 characters, tough to crack, tough to remember, tough to, copy. Makes sense. But when we think of this, it equally disturb user experience because if you ask someone to remember 20 characters of their password, it's practically impossible. So you need to find a mid ground wherein you're not forcing a security that's harsh, that's difficult, or that basically compromise user experience, but you need to have a security that find a balance. So now 8 characters is something which is common, pretty common these days. You can think of 8 characters. Now these are standard policies wherein I say, okay, you need to have these combinations. This is something which even Microsoft is doing. You cannot use your username as your password if you do not define it. 99%, if given a choice, if there is a user, he would always choose a password that he can remember. Now, what I can as a user, I can remember my first name, Atul. I can remember my family name, my mother's, father's, my sister's. I can put those, as an easiest way to remember and use as a password. But that also brings a threat because anyone who knows me, he also knows possible scenarios, my father's name, my mother's name, my sister's name, my first name, my last name, and they can easily guess that. We don't want users to do that. So these are the conditions which we add to stop users from using that. It gives little difficulty, but yeah, these are required, no compromise. The biggest challenge is how we stop users from using something which is very generic. Passwords, QWERTY, administrator, pass at the rate 123. These are very, very generic passwords that are being used by everyone for ages because they are simple, they're easy to remember, and these are very common words that we always remember. But it also brings a difficulty because these are being used by thousands of users globally, worldwide, and probably every time there is a breach, these these password would be, seen somewhere. Now, as a solution, what we have added, so we understand the challenge. What we did is we given a customer a list of these. These are only three examples, but we have given a list of such characters, such passwords, and we have a record of 1.2 million such passwords that were recently found in recent data breaches. So on the back end, we have maintained a depository that stores passwords. Those are recently got compromised in recent data breaches. That means every time there is a data breach, there are sources which provides us the list of accounts those got compromised and the passwords those got compromised, and we maintain that depository. On the back end, we give it to the customers. Now, how it helps? The moment I check this condition, like okay, user cannot use these directory words as their passwords. So basically, what we are doing, we are giving a check of 1.2 million such passwords which were recently found in compromised or data breaches, and we are basically denying users from using those in their passwords. So this makes sure every time users resets his password, those passwords are always strong, secure, and not found in any of the recent data breaches. Now, when it comes to the passwords, there are standard challenges. User got notification. We basically notify users like, okay, this is your password. This is how you need to reset. Now, let's take an example of user got a notification like, okay, dear user, I'm taking example of one of my colleague, Veena. She got a notification that her password is getting, expired in next 2 days. So what she can do is she can simply go to this enter the current password. If it's correct, it basically tells you, and if it's wrong or for some reason account is she kind of forgot it, she can't remember it, she attempts 1 2 3 times, and there is something called account lockout. If you attempt more than 3 4 times, your account will be locked. Now in these scenarios, a user will go back to an administrator like, okay, uh, IT admin, please help me with this. Now with our solution, they don't have to rely on administrator. They can, basically do everything themselves. They simply go to MFA, enter her name, basically it asks you to provide an OTP, and if the OTP is correct, it will let her see her Active Directory profile. Now in this case, because I was not able to remember my password, I can simply go down and see what is my current password, copy it like this, log out, see it, what is my current password, log out and start working. But if I want to reset my password, one, I can type something like this and save it. If it meets the required, conditions, like, okay, you cannot use something which is weak or blacklisted by us as a character, it will throw an error if user is trying to use that. If it's unique, strong, it will let user reset his or her password. Now, sometimes we will struggle because we have our own set of characters or words that we can think of. We also give an option to generate a strong password from the solution itself. The user have an option either use uh, the characters that they feel like or use a system generated password. Now, what this basically takes care is we are making sure whenever users do a password reset, it's always strong. It's not containing characters. Those were found recently in any of the data breaches. So it's straightforward. As a user, I can do this. And now, as an administrator, as a company, we are 100% sure that none of our users are resetting or using their, a weak character in their passwords or using a password that was recently found in any data breaches. So this way, basically, we can control the kind of passwords that we are using currently in Active Directory. Now, this was uh, first of the challenges. Now we basically catered weak password challenge. Now, the second challenge, which basically leads to data breaches, is over excessive permissions given to users. Now, this is a very uh, common problem because if, when we, as IT administrators, when they join a company, Active Directory is pretty much there until they start company from scratch, which is very very rare. Most of the scenarios, at least in 70-80% scenario, people, IT guys join a company wherein they already have existing infrastructure. They already have Active Directory, and one of the oldest assets they will have is Active Directory. It's there in the system for ages. Now, the problem with Active Directory is if something is configured before I joined, before IT administrator joined, there is a very limited way how he can gain visibility. If the configuration is okay, if it's not okay, if it's not optimal, if it's over provisioned, now that becomes a bottleneck now because it's not a full-time job for anyone. They're supposed to manage Active Directory, but it's not a full-time job for them. Now having us basically solves that challenge also. Now as in consider a customer or an administrator joins the company, the first thing he would like to see is how my current configuration looks. When I say current configuration, I would like to see probably who is member of a particular group, maybe domain administrator. So I can go to these are the standard reports. So when I say Active Directory state, it talks about how things are being configured. It's not about changes, how things looks today. So I want to see how many users do I have. I simply click on this. It pulls the data of all my 751 users as a list. Okay. Similarly, when we're thinking of permissions, let's focus on permissions. So let's talk about how many users are there, probably who are my domain administrators. So I can simply, my current focus is domain admin. So I can type like this. If I have any user who is member of domain administrators, I will see that. Give me a second. I guess I have not kept anyone as a domain administrator, which is a great best, which is basically ideally the best practice. But let me see if I can show you some data. I have one operator group member. Mm, So basically what I'm trying to search is if I have added anyone to a domain administrator group. I have not done. So the best practice says if you do not require anyone, if you do not have a justification, don't add anyone to these privileged groups. Now with our solution, you basically can search, like if I have, like for example, I have backup operators, I can see who is member of that group. If I have any other groups, it could be domain administrators, it can be enterprise administrators. So it will give you the list of users who are member of those groups. Now once I have this visibility, I can start understanding if I, when I run a report wherein it says that, okay, these are the 5 users who are your domain administrators. Now, the next step which I have to do is understand why those users are domain administrators. In a very normal scenarios, when you go back to your customers, most of the time, when they're running tools like backups, when they're running tools like patching, when they're running tools like DLPs, these tools requires privileges, but not always domain admin or enterprise admin. These require certain set of privileges that can be catered by making them server operator member or by making them a member of backup group. But the default setting, anyone like if you add to a domain administrator, your life is easy because you will never find any friction because those are the maximum permissions you can have. So 80-90% scenario, you will see people adding users randomly to domain administrator groups, which is not a great practice. You should not have anyone in those groups until unless you have a very strong justification. Now, once we have this visibility, all customer have to do is start understanding if there is a user, why that user is there in that group. Okay, the first condition is to understand who is who. Once that is done, there's another scenario wherein customer find challenges is understanding. if there are users who are not even domain administrator but they have permissions. Now this is a hidden uh, backdoor that is called delegation. So when we think of a delegation, it's very simple. I make you administrator without adding you to a certain group. Basically, it's hidden. So if until unless you have to like us, you cannot understand. So for example, I have a user Ravi. He can change password. He can update user attributes. So as good as administrator, but he's not member of any domain admin groups because when I was running a report around domain admin, we didn't find this. Similarly, if I go to another group, another OU and run a report, I see there is another user Abhijit, there is another user Amit. Now these guys have all the required permission to do anything in these OUs, but they are not member of any enterprise groups or domain administrator groups. Now, as a best practice, this is something which we need to do. We should not make anyone as an enterprise admin or a domain admin if they have a role and responsibility which involves resetting password, user creation, or performing certain tasks. You should basically delegate those required permission to those users around those OUs wherein they are managing those, those respective OUs. Now, this is a good practice, but if you do not have visibility, people will never know that this is technically an administrator, even though he's not a member, but he's a technically administrator because he has those set permissions. Now, what we are offering to our customer is a very holistic view to see how the AD current permissions are assigned. One, by looking at the current group memberships. Two, looking at the delegation, how the current delegation looks. Who, if there is a user who have a certain set of permission on a OU, how those permissions looks. Okay, so once this visibility is there, customer will start focusing on if we have over provisioned it, if the required permissions are required, do we have a justification for those or not? Now, once we have reviewed everything, once we have, analyzed everything, once we have stabilized everything, once we have created a baseline, the next step is to make sure in future when we are delegating permissions in future, because this is part of day-to-day job, you will have users who will come back to you and say that, okay, you know what, I need to be member of maybe, like, let's take an example of same user, Veena. Now, on a regular basis, there could be a possibility that this user need to be in a member of a group. Now, this is a normal scenario which we get to perform a task, to do a task. User need to be a member of a certain group. These groups can be default. These could be custom groups. Now, the typical operational challenge or the operational mistake that we do in Active Directories, we permanently add them to a group. It's not something a human mistake. It's just that if you have to add a user to a group, you basically add to a AD group. Now it becomes the administrator's responsibility to remember when to remove that user from a group. Now it could be within a day, it could be after a month, it could be after a year. And it's practically impossible because, as I said, it's not a full-time job for anyone. It's part of their job to manage Active Directory. Now it's tough to remember or think that they can remember, like, okay, yesterday I gave them access, I need to remove him. Practically, you would like to do that, but it's impossible to remember everything. Now we understand that challenge. So when you have to modify permissions, delegate permissions, we offer you something called just in time. What it do is it basically ask you what it basically lists you all the groups that are possible in your or available in your Active Directory. You select one of the group, like I want him to or her to be a domain administrator because she needs to install an application on one of the machines. So for that she needs permissions. Now, but when I delegate permission, I also delegate the duration. Like I want this user to have domain admin privileges probably for another hour, a day, a week, a month, a year. Based on my input, the solution will delegate these permission, will add these permission to the users. Okay. And after that particular time threshold is reached, it will remove the user from the respective group. Now, what we are doing is we are making sure There is no excessive permission given to anyone if they don't need it. If the user only needs it for 5 minutes, we will only give it for 5 minutes. If they only need it for 10 minutes, we will only give it for 10 minutes. And once those time thresholds are touched, solution will revoke those memberships automatically from the backend. So it basically gives a certainty that there is no excessive permissions given to any users after we have created a baseline, after we have cleaned our active directory. Because currently there is no mechanism of doing it. You fix your permissions, and within next 3 months you will see, oh, we have added more users to groups and we have to clean again. After 3 months, the cycle keeps repeating. Now we have given a way to make sure there is no over excessive permissions to anyone. Now, once this is done, so you also gets reports wherein you can see, if we have given group memberships, so you can see users when the group memberships were added, when it will end, all that reports are there. The solution also offers something called auditing. So we have done everything now. We have, made sure that passwords are always strong. User cannot use a weak password. We made sure to get a visibility around how the current permissions looks. If permissions are given through AD group, we have visibility to that. If permissions are given through a delegated, method, we have visibility to that. Now, when in future, when we add permissions, we go a just-in-time bound rule. So only a time-bound access is given to user, and after that, permissions are revoked. The last piece which you have to do is having a constant visibility of the changes that are happening. Now, when we think of a ransomware attack, when we think of a brute force attack or any attack in the nature, until unless you have shared your password with anyone directly, you will see failed login attempts. So all you need to do is monitor or keep a close track on failed login attempts, successful logon attempts around the users that are happening. So solution offers visibility around like, okay, let's see how many failed or successful logons user have around a time frame. Now this also gives you visibility to see who are active in your environment, if they're active, um, when was the last time they were active, and the underline is the type of logons. Now, if you see here, we are giving you logon data, but with that, we are also giving you type. Now, in a very generic terms, type defines how the logons are happening. For example, if you have a user, uh, Ribu or Veena, and they are getting type 4 logons, those are not interactive logons. So basically, what it means is they are not control F and delete and typing their password. The credentials are stored somewhere in a service on the network, and those services are calling these, credentials, which is not a safe sign. Now, having this visibility also help customers to see, identify like this is my privileged account. If it have any type 4 credentials, logons? If yes, from which workstation the requests are coming, let me investigate. Because if I have not given this account or I'm not using this as a service account, it basically means there is something in the network that is using it as a service, which is not a good sign. So auditing will also help customers to see the changes or see the real-time changes or threats that are visible in the environment. The last piece around the password. Now, every customer wherein you deal or interact will give you some standard uh, justification of storing passwords in a Excel sheet. You will see them storing credentials in Excel sheets. Uh, like if you have a DLP solution and we have 2 or 3 administrators, we have to share credentials for that service account to make sure DLP is working configured. Now, in those scenarios, password need to be shared somewhere or kept somewhere, so we both or 2 colleagues can share that credentials, which is not a very safe, practice, because if it's on an Excel sheet, it's on a notepad, it can be easily stolen. Now, what we do is we offer something called password manager. it's a very straightforward approach. Any account that you have in your environment that deals with services or deals with solutions like firewalls, switches, routers, you store them under password manager. Now, once the account is stored under password manager, you will see the list, and every administrator in your company or any normal user can have access to that without keeping it on a sheet. It will be stored centrally on the platform. Okay, so this is overall brief demo about the solution. Let me go back to the presentation. Let me just go back to the presentation again. Okay, let me basically summarize what we have already covered. So we talked about a self-service portal. This is basically for end users, which simplify password resets and offer a secure vault. Now the features for user, as a user, I will have an option to reset my own password. If in case I'm locked, I can unlock myself. The solution offers multi-factor authentication support. So we on the back end, we support Google Authenticator, Microsoft RSA. For a user, the best piece is if they have to use the solution, they don't have to enroll it. It's auto enrollment on the back end, so it's ready to use. So there is no tedious process of registering. It's auto enrolled. Solution offers 1.2 million global and custom banned password lists. So a certainty or a surety that in any scenario, we are not using a weak password that could lead to a data breach in my environment or a customer environment. On the backend, we have implemented logics like 50% weak match rule to make sure resetting password for user is not becoming painful, and they are not using something that I have banned with one or two additions of additional characters. Like if I have banned QWERTY, I don't want users to use, and QWERTY is in my list, and users are coming up with a smart move like QWERTY 123. Solution will identify that if the overall password length and the in the password overall blacklisted character is more than 50%, solution will reject that password. Okay, so the solution comes with intelligence. We also have implemented fuzzy match. What basically it do is if a user replace A with the at the rate, S with the dollar, zero with O, or O with zero, we will also understand that okay, these characters are swapped, but still it's a weak password. So we will restrict that also. So what we have basically implemented on the solution is certainty that under any scenario, user cannot use a weak password. Okay. The next thing is around AD management and audit. The solution offers a comprehensive dashboard wherein you can see the current state of your AD. You can see all the audit trails. Solution automates certain tasks if required, um, like user creation, modification from the solution itself. So no one needs to have access to Active Directory directly. They can do everything from the solution itself. We offer password manager. We just talked about it. It basically store all your service account credentials centrally, and from there you can share credentials with all your administrator or user or temporary employees or contractors without sharing it through a chat or piece of paper. You can use this one. Policy enforcers basically make sure that uh, users are always using a stronger password. That's the backend of the solution. Then we also have password expiry, account expiry notification just to make sure user knows when their accounts or passwords are expiring well in advance. Uh, then we have auditing, which basically help customers to see if there are any changes happening in their environment. Just in time access to make sure only right permissions of is given to users around a certain time frame and it's not permanent. Then we also have rollback that we have not touched, but it's basically allow customers to undo a change that they might have committed. So basically, if you have deleted a user, you can restore that user from the solution itself. State and changes. We touched state and changes. State basically will help customer to see how things are configured. We looked into the current permission delegation. That's basically the state of Active Directory. Changes the changes that we are doing on day-to-day basis. Creation of user, modification of users, password reset, those are changes. We cover both. Delegations we touched. Now, this is something which we have not touched, but I will just briefly. We all know something called DPDP is coming in, in future, probably in next 2-3 months. Now, what is DPDP? So DPDP is our version of GDPR. So worldwide, we have data protection uh, law in India. We're expecting it to come this year. Now, what it will do is it basically is designed to safeguard individual privacy. Now, we have seen no one cares in India currently how your data is being stored, processed. Anyone can ask your, first name, last name, your mobile numbers, your address, store it the way they want to. Once we have this law in picture, if the data is stored, is not secured, and if it is compromised, the company who is responsible for that mistake could have to pay somewhere around 4 to 6% of their annual turnover. That's huge. So if someone takes your data, like we have seen HDFCs in the world, of, you know, they have data breaches. One, they have to report the data breaches. Second, once the law comes into, currently big companies always report data breaches, but in future it becomes a law. They have to. They don't have a choice. They have to report, and then an investigation, agency hired by government will go and investigate if they had right pieces to save that data or to protect from those data breaches. Now, as a solution, we will be helping customers. These are the sections of the DPDP that will come into pictures, which talks about password security, asset security, access management, um, consent withdrawal, and others. So, as a solution, we will be helping customers around these also. If you have a customer who is interested in these, we can talk to them also. Now, we covered this one. The last thing, as a solution, these are the three verticals wherein we are focusing. One, the focus is around compliance. So we offer more than 250 plus reports, which basically talks about AD security posture. So those 250 plus parameters will help customers to see the current and the possible weakness in their Active Directory. That basically allow them to proactively fix those gaps before a data breach or any threat comes into picture. Permissions, anything that we are or customers are implementing or delivering should follow just in time access policy. So we have implemented in our solution. So in future, when customers is using, they are certain like, okay, even if I have given a permission, there is a time bound permission access given. There is a justification why this access was given to them. Identity risk, the current security that customers you will find in a customer scenario would be in silos. You will have an Active Directory, a user profile in Active Directory. Then you have O365 accounts that basically runs on Azure. Now, in a lot of scenarios, if AD sync is not working, the sync is not working, a user logon data or information on Active Directory is different. Your Azure authentication is different. They don't talk to each other. So the the visibility is in silos. So for example, if I have to take a decision around if a user is actually active or inactive, I have to look at AD first, then I have to look at Azure, and then I have to manually correlate that data to make a decision around it. This is a problem for every customer, and we are working on a solution that basically correlate that data and gives a single glass of view. Like, okay, if I say a user is inactive, but he is inactive because on the back end, we have analyzed everything, and based on that analysis, we are saying, okay, we have analyzed both the data points, and both based on those analysis, the user is inactive. He should not be a member of X group because he have not done any logons for last X number of days. He's disabled. He should not be member of those. So we are working on a mechanism which basically correlate data from multiple data sources to enable and empower customers to take right decisions. So risk models, basically, these are the risk models around which our solution is designed for AD assessments. Now, these are little comprehensive details. If you have questions, I will answer these. But basically, this is nothing but basis of what we analyze whether your Active Directory or a customer environment is secure or not. We pick data or collect data around these data points or these parameters and create a topology and make a visibility to customer like, okay, based we have collected data points and prima facie it looks like you are at risk or you are okay or there's no problems. That's all from my end. uh, we technically are open for question and answers if you have any. Thank you. Okay, we have few in chats. Probably what I can do is we're actually running sort of time. So what we can do is we can take the notes of the question answer that we are getting in chat window and we'll communicate one to one after the webinar session. Fine guys, so yeah, thank you very much for your time and I hope you've found this session interactive and useful and helpful. And if you have any other further questions, please feel free to reach out to Pooja and we will be more than happy to assist you guys on this. Thank you. Pooja, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. See, we have one raised hand.
Pooja, probably after the session we can have those questions. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a very, very good day. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.